Otto von Bismarck by Cohen Mooney. Who was Otto von Bismarck? Otto von Bismarck was a leader of Prussia, later Germany, from 1862 to 1890. His first major role was of prime minister, and later he became the chancellor. He was known as the Iron Chancellor because he wanted to create a strong, unified German power in Central Europe and unify it through blood and iron, which is war and not diplomacy. Why was he important to modern society as well as early 1900s Germany, as well as late 1800s Germany? He was instrumental in the creation of one of the most influential European countries, which is now modern-day Germany. This was also important throughout history since Otto von Bismarck's time and power, because they became one of the most industrialized and most powerful countries in Europe. His early years. Otto was born on April 1st, 1815 to a wealthy Prussian family in Schönhausen. His father was a military officer and his mother came from a line of civil servants. Otto was a middle child with an older brother and a younger sister. During his childhood, the family had a modest income due to his father's lack of agricultural abilities. His mother decided to move Otto from the family estate in Pomerania to Berlin at age 7 to attend schools. His education. Otto von Bismarck attended some of the most prestigious schools in Berlin during his youth. Bismarck attended university where he studied law in the Kingdom of Hanover. Otto was a mediocre student he spent much of his time in college drinking and being a frat boy like you see on many college campuses today. After studying in Hanover, he had a brief stint at the University of Berlin before becoming a civil servant. Otto found his time in the civil service to be monotonous and boring. He resigned in 1839 after the death of his mother, where he moved back to aid his father in running the mismanaged estate. He worked on his family's estate until 1847. After 1847, we see where he started to rise to power. Much of this started when he married Johanna von Puttkamer, who came from a conservative aristocratic family. While with Johanna, Otto had a religious awakening, and they had a happy marriage throughout the rest of their lives. In 1849, he was elected to the Prussian Chamber of Deputies, where he stood firmly as wanting Prussia to be its own entity, not being taken over by Austria or Russia or any other countries. And he wanted Prussia to be Prussia, not a German state, just Prussia. In 1851, Otto was appointed as the Prussian representative in Frankfurt because of his loyalty to King Frederick Wilhelm IV. During his time in Frankfurt, Otto changed what he thought he wanted Prussia to be, as now he wanted a strong Prussia with large swaths of land and power, and he wanted it to be a large German state. He did not want to side with Austria, though, because he saw them as being on the decline. He wanted to redirect the Austrian focus from the Northern Europe to the Slavic regions, and much of his abilities of getting his way to power depended on his great communication abilities. Here's a map of Central Europe before Otto von Bismarck rose to power and created a unified German state. As you can see, the German Confederation, outlined in the dark black, was made up of many smaller countries, with Prussia and Austria both taking up large swaths of land and holding much power. Prussia had power and influence over most of the northern states, whereas Austria had power and influence over the southern states. France also had imposed a little bit of influence over the states in the west, and Prussia did not like how much power other countries had over the German Confederation. In the north, we can see where Prussia and Austria had taken over in parts of Denmark later on, in Schleswig and Holstein, which are highlighted in orange and yellow right under Denmark. The policies that Otto von Bismarck used to create his German state were the idea of realpolitik, which he used to better Germany rather than play to what party he wanted, although he was conservative. He did put much thought into what he could do to help better Germany, and by doing this he put in some socialist ideas such as pensions and workers' insurance, because he found that these would create a better industrial power and provide better industry to the Prussian state. He wanted to help Prussia become a stronger country through the use of warfare, as he saw this as the only way to unite Germany. He thought that using blood and iron to reunite the German states would be better than using it through diplomacy, which he thought would fail. After wars, he would create alliances to give Prussia a strong ally, in which the treaties were heavily skewed in Prussia's favor, because victory was created by him and he put in what he wanted into the treaties. What did Otto von Bismarck aim to do? Otto von Bismarck wanted a strong Prussian state. He wanted to turn Prussia from a minor power to one of the top powers in the European stage. To do this, he needed to create a leading industrial power out of Prussia as well. To do this, he implemented policies that promoted industrial growth as well as modernizing Prussia's rail system. With this new industrial prowess, he wanted to create a large area of land for the new Prussian state. He did this through a series of wars to unite the German Confederation under the Prussian banner. He figured he had to do this expansion through fighting rather than diplomacy, which we saw in his Blood and Iron speech, in which he stated that diplomacy would get them nowhere, and that only through blood and iron could there be a strong German state. Part of reaching Otto von Bismarck's aims was industrializing Prussia. Otto von Bismarck helped establish a large modernized rail system that was instrumental in the quick movement of goods around Prussia. This helped move the raw materials from where they were extracted to places where they could be processed in a quick, timely manner and in large quantities. The modernized rail was also used for quick mobilization of troops to aid the quick blitzkrieg-style wars that Otto von Bismarck preferred to fight. To help stimulate economic growth, Otto von Bismarck implemented tariffs, which helped to stimulate local iron production as well as grain production, because the tariffs were in place so that people would rather purchase the materials produced in Prussia rather than having to import materials from elsewhere. The boost for the production of raw materials helped stimulate the growth of large industry in Prussia, things such as steelworks as well as armaments. The new birth of large industry also helped boost the Prussian economy and helped fuel Otto's goal of large military endeavors to create a unified German state. What wars were instrumental in his rise to power? First was the war with Denmark. Prussia and Austria allied together to take over Schleswig and Holstein, which were states controlled by Denmark. Victory gave Otto support from the nationalists in parliament, however, this war did lead to territorial disputes with Austria. However, that led to the Austrian-Prussian Wars, in which Otto wanted to get Austria away from the German Confederation and gain control over the northern German lands. He wanted Prussia to be the sole influencers over the northern part of the German Confederation, because he did not like that Austria's Catholicism could hold power over the Prussian Protestantism, which he favored. So through this war, he attacked Austria and tried to aim to keep the other European powers out of the war, which worked, because England did not see them as a threat. France wanted to see Prussia and Austria weaken, and Russia saw Prussia as a potential ally if they wanted to take over Poland. And then Prussia as well had an alliance with Italy, who was hoping to gain territory from Austria that Austria controlled in Italian lands. Austria only had allies with the small German states, which easily got taken over by Prussia's advanced technology and the Italian allies, helping them gain a quick war and gain full control over the territory gained from the war with Denmark, Schleswig and Holstein, as well as taking the states that had divided East and West Prussia. In the aftermath, Prussia kept Austria as an ally, also forming a new confederation of North Germany. Prussia's new land caused tensions with France, as Germany was wanting to bring southern German states into their new confederation, but they had close ties with France, the new states that Prussia wanted, and Prussia thought that conflict was inevitable. And then Spain had a revolution that dethroned Queen Isabella II and put Leopold in charge. Leopold had close ties with Prussia and the Prussian nobility, and that made Napoleon III, the leader of France, upset, because he did not want Spain to be close allies with Prussia, as that would cause them to have enemies on both fronts. In July 1870, Napoleon III declared war on Prussia, and in September, Napoleon III had capitulated. Prussia had gained the territories of Alsace and Lorraine, finishing Otto's goal of a German empire. Here we have a map of the Franco-Prussian War. The quick Prussian push into Paris had led to the capture of Napoleon III and a swift end to the war. This was using Otto von Bismarck's blitzkrieg strategy of a quick, fast, calculated war in order to quickly defeat his enemies and keep morale high. The swift end to the war showed Prussia's prowess in fighting, even against a great power like France, who was one of the major players on the stage of Europe, whereas Prussia was viewed as just an insignificant power. Otto von Bismarck's life was not all just war and attacking and nation building. He also had a loving family with his wife Johanna. He had a daughter named Marie, born in 1848, a son named Herbert, born in 1849, and a son named Wilhelm, born in 1852. Although an imposing figure, Otto von Bismarck had a deep love for his family and their long relationship. Otto von Bismarck's fall from grace. When Kaiser Wilhelm II took the throne after the death of his predecessor, he wanted to rapidly expand out without thought. Otto was calculated in his expansions, whereas Wilhelm II just wanted aggressive expansionism and to create a larger Germany. Kaiser Wilhelm II was also dissatisfied with Otto von Bismarck's conservatism, as he did not like the calm, cool, collected demeanor, and he wanted to quickly create a larger German power through his expansionist ideals. Once Bismarck had lost the majority in Parliament, he tried to retain his power by calling for strikes from his other like-minded conservatives. By doing these strikes, Otto von Bismarck had lost favor with the military, and thus he lost all of his power. Much of this new shift in power was viewed as the old regime of the Junkers versus the new unbridled fury of the unmoderated imperials, who wanted a swift, large empire versus the conservatism of just the want of a strong Prussia by the former people like Otto von Bismarck. The events of Otto von Bismarck's failure to hold power culminated with his forced resignation on March 18, 1890, in which afterwards he had retired. After being forced to resign, Otto von Bismarck had retired away from politics. In his retirement, Otto von Bismarck had wrote memoirs in his estate near Hamburg. He had disagreed with many of the new actions taken by his replacements and the Kaiser because of his bitterness about being forced to resign. He did not like the new ideas that the people in charge were pushing forward, as he thought that they were reckless and would lead to the downfall of all that he had worked for in his Prussian/German state. He thought that these quick these quick wars and, and swiftness to attack would cause the downfall of Prussia, as they would not be able to withstand numerous fights against large powers, as now all the alliances that he had worked so hard to create had fallen apart because he was no longer in power. He viewed that all the countries that Prussia had fought against and taken land from before would now come back wanting revenge. And by doing all these expansions, the new German Empire would be spread too thin and would fall to the larger powers surrounding them. In 1894, Otto von Bismarck's wife Johanna had passed away. After this, Otto von Bismarck's health had then began to fail. He had contracted gangrene in his foot and became bound to a wheelchair. In July of 1898, Otto von Bismarck had passed away and was entombed in the Bismarck Mausoleum, shown on the slide. He was enshrined next to his wife of many years, and now they are resting together in eternity in their family's mausoleum. What were Otto von Bismarck's impact on Europe? Due to Germany's newfound power that they had tried to flex their muscle, and as it resulted in World War I and the collapse of the German Empire. This also then resulted in the radicalism that Adolf Hitler pushed forward in his creation of the Nazi Germany state and the Third Reich, which had further reduced Europe's abilities, as they had then became more of a crumbled state and eventually split into two different states ruled by different powers. Germany was also a new industrial power, and their technology and manufacturing has been unmatched in Europe in the past century. We see this with the creation of rockets, jets, and many motor cars, such as Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and Audi, and Porsche. Germany has also provided a stable hand in Central Europe since it was created, staying away from the problems that arise from small states, because now that Germany was one big centralized power, it could control more of the middle of Europe versus having numerous small states that were all vying for power and resources. Where would Europe be without Otto von Bismarck? The power balance in Europe would probably be so much different, as we could still see a large empire states such as Austria or a larger France, as they could have tried to swallow up all of the smaller states in the middle of Europe. We would be seeing a large grasp for power and vying for who had the largest military and who had the strongest nation in Europe. We would also try to see many more European countries trying to stay afloat in our modern world, where if you are a small country, it's hard to have enough resources to provide a good GDP and stay afloat as a country with prosperous citizens and a prosperous place to live. The track of the world wars also would have been much different, as without a strong German state, much of the reasons for World War One would be non-existent, because many of much of the fighting in World War One was caused by German aggression, as well as Germans not playing by the rules of war, thereby upsetting many of the other world powers at the time. We also then wouldn't have seen Nazi Germany, as France wouldn't have blamed Germany for World War One and wouldn't have forced them to pay reparations. Much of this could have been avoided, but we also don't know if we would have seen a Nazi Germany rise out of a new Austrian state if they had still fought in World War One, but were forced to pay reparations like France forced the Germans to pay. As we could have seen then a rise of radicalism in this new Austrian state, which could have ended up turning into what we saw with the Nazi Germany. Whatever the situation would have been, our world would look much different than it does now, without what Otto von Bismarck had done to create a centralized German state in Europe. Otto von Bismarck has left a lasting legacy through his formidable appearance and his stalwart leadership that made him known as the Iron Chancellor. His 6'4" frame, his walrus mustache, and his military gear with his spiked pickle-helm helmet has created a fearsome leader who is known for unifying Germany and helping to make it what it would later become. Outside of Germany, he also created a 20-year peace in Europe through his alliance systems, and was known as being a great tactician and known for manipulating the peoples around him through their weaknesses and not playing to their strengths. However great his German empire was that he created, it was a ticking time bomb for any leader who wasn't himself, as many of the alliances that he created were very specific and dependent on him being in charge. This ticking time bomb we saw later explode and ended in World War One, and the fall of the German Empire that Otto von Bismarck had helped create so lovingly was also came to its demise via the systems that he had in place. Thank you for listening about Otto von Bismarck and what he did to form a unified German state, and the impact it had on his time period, as well as how the state of the world would be in a more modern sense.